Welcome, and thank you for joining the League of Women Voters State of the County Address. My name is Linda Langston, and I will serve as your moderator today. First, I want to note that the League of Women Voters has just celebrated its 100th birthday in 2020. Our mission at the League is empowering voters and defending democracy. The League of Women Voters of Linn County holds candidate and legislative forums, prints and distributes a directory of local elected officials after elections, registers new voters, provides information programs which are open to the public, such as the Linn County Auditor's updates on elections. And the Linn County League in Linn County also monitors legislation and contacts legislators regarding the League positions on legislation. Membership in the League is open to anyone 16 years and older, and we welcome your membership. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and our webpage can be found at www.lwvlinncounty.org. The county's website can also be found at www.linncounty.org. The League's highlight in 2020 in the commemoration of the National League of Women Voters' 100th birthday was a commissioning of a 17-foot sculpture, Forge, Stand, Rise, by Mount Vernon artist Dale Merrill. It was unveiled on October 22nd and stands along the trail beside the Cedar Rapids Museum of Art. I encourage you on these lovely spring days to drop by and take a look. The League would also like to take a moment to thank our sponsors for today, including at the gold level, Shuttleworth and Ingersoll, Mid-America Energy, Alliant Energy, the Greater Cedar Rapids Community Foundation, and ITC. At the silver level, Lynch Dallas, the City of Cedar Rapids Utility Managers, the Cedar Rapids Iowa City Building Trades and Hawkeye Labor Council, HR Green, Collins Aerospace, and Simmons Perrine, Moyer and Bergman. We could not do these kinds of things without their support, and we appreciate them. Today, I'm pleased to have Stacey Walker, Chair of the Linn County Board of Supervisors, to share with us the state of the county. His fellow supervisors are also out on our listening as well, and that would be Supervisor Louis Zumba and Supervisor Ben Rogers. We also acknowledge the other Linn County elected officials and appreciate their service. For today's virtual presentation, Stacey will make his presentation via video. It's been pre-recorded, and you'll have an opportunity to watch that, and you'll also be able to submit questions via chat. After the video is over, I'll ask a few questions of Stacey, and then we'll move into those chat questions. We will try to get as many questions as possible. And very often we take the time to try to consolidate those questions so we can get in as many as we can. So, thank you, Stacey, for joining us, and I believe we'll go to the video now.
Good morning. My thanks to the League of Women Voters for organizing this event. These regular interactions with government are an invaluable public service and serve as another bridge between the people and their representatives in office. I would also like to thank all of you for tuning in today. I know there are 1,000,001 things you could be doing, but you chose to tune in for this event. It's hard to articulate just how challenging this past year has been. The global pandemic has fundamentally changed our way of life. Extreme weather events and a shuttered economy has brought enormous pain and suffering. We here in Linn County are used to being resilient, but these events pushed many to the brink. Darwin taught us that the secret of survival is adaptation, being willing to change and adjust to the things we cannot control. We're still here today, and the state of the county is strong because we have been able to adapt to this season of great challenge. We have maintained continuous operations of government, providing critical services to residents while navigating unprecedented circumstances. With the leadership of Don Gendrich and Sarah Barrows, the Board of Supervisors developed a budget that endured unforeseen emergency expenditures, yet still funded all of our departments and agencies, all without raising the levy rate. We have maintained a healthy fund balance and our AAA bond rating. In sum, our services increased, but your county taxes did not. And perhaps one of the greatest challenges to our budget, to our community, our country, and our world is that posed by the novel coronavirus. It came about in the final month of 2019 and quickly developed into a global health emergency. The world's health community rallied and gave us their best advice. Best practices were established in every developed country. Here in America, each state pursued its own strategy with differing measures of success. The states that acted swiftly undoubtedly saved lives. The states that doubted the science or played politics with the disease suffered the most. Right now, Iowa has the 7th highest number of reported cases per capita in the country and the 2nd highest COVID-19 test positivity rate in the nation. These are not necessarily encouraging numbers, but thanks to the heroic work of public health officials around the state and in this county especially, we are vaccinating our residents with great speed and diligence, ensuring that no one is left behind. We are making a concerted effort to reach marginalized communities, including minority communities that have well-founded concerns about their disparate treatment by medical professionals, an unfortunate history that spans the generations. We're reaching out to the elderly, to the resource-limited, to populations of immigrants and undocumented individuals. We know that this virus is no respecter of race, religion, or creed. We are made safer when everyone in our community is granted access to the vaccine. The heroes of this crisis are many and must never be forgotten. They are our frontline workers, our nurses and doctors, gas station clerks and grocery store workers. They're the truck drivers and factory workers, our teachers and our farmers, and of course, the women and men in government service and of our Linn County Public Health Department. I have never seen a more dedicated group of public servants in my life. They have poured their heart and souls into pandemic recovery efforts. When actors at the highest levels of our government were defiant, insisting that this global pandemic was not serious, or worse, even a hoax, these public health experts remained diligent, putting their years of training and expertise to good use to save this community. To save this community. They are our heroes. Under the direction of Dr. Pramod Dwivedi, Linn County Public Health became one of the most trusted sources of information and was consulted by corporations, school districts, and governments across the state for advice. These women and men are world class, and they deserve all of our praise and admiration. Their work is not yet done, and neither is ours. We honor these heroes by doing our part to mitigate the spread of the virus and keep one another safe. We must continue to wear our masks, wash our hands, and respect social distancing until this pandemic comes to an end. Another group of individuals who deserve our praise are all of the Iowans who came together in emergency recovery efforts after the extreme weather event over the summer. On August 10th of last year, Linn County was hit by a derecho. This storm system developed quickly and blew across the state with wind speeds in excess of 140 miles per hour. In other words, we were hit by a Category 4 hurricane, and Linn County caught the worst of it. at $7.5 billion, the costliest thunderstorm in U.S. history destroyed homes, devastated our tree canopy, and set off a chain reaction of an untold number of humanitarian crises. And while some aspects of the state and local response were laudable, we must be clear and brutally honest about the fact that there were systematic failures across the board. Government and the officials who run it should take responsibility for these failures. Those who don't are not fit to serve. A big part of taking responsibility is taking the time to learn so that we do better in the future. We need to enhance our response capabilities, and they should include the necessary humanitarian initiatives required to protect the most vulnerable members of our community. And while it's important to have plans, we cannot be limited by them. On more than one occasion, when people needed critical resources, we were prevented from accessing them because some officials believed the contingencies didn't allow for their deployment. Managing emergencies requires officials to do whatever it takes to help those in need. When people's lives hang in the balance, we cannot hide behind the rule books. We cannot shrink from our duties. The pandemic, the derecho, and hard economic times brought to light the systemic inequities that have always existed in our community. For generations, these inequities have been ignored and deprioritized. The people in which they afflict have been pushed to the margins, literally living in substandard housing in communities where white flight has taken with it wealth and resources long ago. When the larger community suffers, even in the slightest, our vulnerable communities are decimated. I find myself going back to the question, who is it we want to be? It's a challenge I've put before this community time and again since coming to office. The great majority find it a worthy cause to explore. The few who are perplexed or disgruntled tend to be those unaffected by systemic harm. And if they are, they may not even know it. Sometimes it's about the messenger. Because a black man talks about these things, it's easy to see these critiques only through a racial lens. But the problems we face cut much deeper than race. Homelessness in this state is up 14.3% since last year. 389,000 Iowans are struggling with hunger. 139,000 of those individuals are children. And the greatest predictor of one's SAT score and future success is their zip code. We have an emergency of poverty in America. We have a wealth gap in America. We have an opportunity gap in America. Again, these indicators cut much deeper than race. Black people are homeless. White people are homeless. Black people are struggling with hunger. White people are struggling with hunger. Black people need jobs, and white people need jobs too. At their core, these are economic issues, and everyone is sharing in the pain. It is in our common interest to work together to give all people a chance to succeed, a chance to share in the basic pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. A rising tide will lift all ships. Homelessness, hunger, and poverty. All of these issues can be alleviated, all of them through government action at the local, state, and federal level, and through community partnerships. This has been the case for generations. What stands in the way is ignorance and political will. A deficit of political will has plagued our politics since the beginning, but it was on full display this past summer. After a series of high-profile killings of unarmed Black Americans sparked an entire movement for social change, many of our elected leaders here in local government failed to meet the moment with courage. In fact, they showed us exactly how government should not respond to its people crying out for change. While Black people across this country were being killed by police, the demonstrations in this community were peaceful. No property was destroyed, and every demand for change that was made was forward-looking and achievable. Out of this movement, one that can trace its lineage to the civil rights movement of the past, new leaders emerged, and these new leaders will get us to the promised land of freedom and justice for all people in this community. The movement, which many in government truly did not understand, was excoriated, mocked, and then dismissed. And as the energy of the righteous voices intensified, the defiance of local government grew. However, in the end, it was the people, not the politicians, who emerged victorious. In this community, the moral arc of the universe was pulled a little closer to justice. Concessions were made, and much-needed reform is well on its way. It never had to be this difficult. Elected leaders should come to office with a willingness to listen and learn, and when leaders of an oppressed minority are pointing out systemic failures, all of us would be wise to listen. For me personally, a black man with a front row seat to it all, I witnessed my peers in local government display a profound level of ignorance on these complex issues of race. Now, it is certainly okay to not know about these things. On its face, ignorance can be forgiven. However, willful and persistent ignorance is dangerous and unbecoming of a public official. We cannot expect to govern a diverse population in this time without having even a cursory understanding of these issues. We cannot expect to heal our communities without first coming to terms with the things that have harmed them. Now is the time for critical thinkers. Surely we can hold two truths in our minds at once. We can acknowledge policing as a noble profession while also acknowledging the need for reform. We can criticize our leaders without casting aspersions on their character. We can love our community while pointing out her flaws. We can point out her triumphs too. We moved one step closer in the process to bring the very first agri-community to Linn County with the Dow's Farm Project. The brainchild of former Linn County Supervisor Brent Olson and former Director of Planning and Development Les Beck, the Dow's Project will be a legacy initiative and a model of sustainable development for the entire state. The Safe, Equitable, and Thriving Communities Fund, managed by Carla Tweetball and Rachel Rockwell of the Greater Cedar Rapids Community Foundation, has reached nearly $1 million of total investments, validating it as a vehicle for social change and squarely anchoring it in this community for the foreseeable future. It is spearheading the group violence intervention model, an evidence-based approach to addressing severe conflict among young people. The Linn County Board of Supervisors was the first government entity to believe in this effort. We've contributed $200,000 to date, and we are committed to supporting this initiative until the problems of poverty and youth gun violence in this community come to an end. Through the tireless efforts of Supervisor Ben Rogers and other community partners, Linn County opened one of the first mental health access centers in the state of Iowa. This center will provide 24/7 high-quality care to individuals experiencing a mental health crisis or substance use emergency. Its very existence demonstrates that there is a role for government to not only provide these critical services, but to play an active role in destigmatizing mental health treatment. This is a quantum leap for mental health advocacy. This is a lifeline for many in this community. And while all of the issues we try to address through government action are important, in the end, none of them will matter if we don't ensure a habitable planet. There is no compromise here. We must do all that we can now to pass down a healthy planet to future generations. This is why I helped lead Linn County in declaring a climate emergency, setting the stage for the creation of the first ever sustainability department, led by the soon-to-be Dr. Tamara Marcus. Under her leadership, we will do climate justice, and we will lead the state in our efforts. All of these things and more are reasons why the state of our county is strong. Our government is trusted. It is efficient. It is filled with experts and dedicated public servants, and it strives to be one of the largest enterprises for good. This is our strength. And if, for some reason, this is my last opportunity to address you all as chair of the Linn County Board of Supervisors, may I leave you with this. My entire time in office has been spent challenging our community and her leaders to envision a progressive, inclusive, and equitable county. This has come with some conflict and pushback, two things common in politics as the arena of life and government is filled with toil. But it has also come with a great deal of heart and love of people. I've often said the point of being in elected office, the point of government, is to help people and solve problems. Over the years, we've helped thousands of people in this community, and we've endeavored to address some of the toughest challenges. We come to work every day thinking about how to help those in need in the present, while planning to meet the challenges that may still be generations away. This is what good leaders do. We work in the dark, we do what we can, we give what we have. I implore you all to remain encouraged, to stay engaged, ready to stand up and speak out for what you believe in. Seek truth in all things. Be kind to one another. Lean in and learn about the things we may initially fear, so that we may be reminded that in the end, we are not so different after all. And do all of these things with the express intent to make gentle the life of this world. Thank you.
We're going to move to some questions from me that I hope will be a bit of a conversation while we wait for some of the questions from the audience to come in. And I believe that Dawn Jones, the communications director for the League of Women Voters here in Linn County, will be managing those questions for us. So first, Stacey, we as a country are facing the potential of a lot of dollars coming to assist through the American Rescue Plan that was recently signed into law. And so every county and city across the country right now is contemplating, how will I best use those funds and what might they be used for? And as someone who both has sat in your seat before and also has done a lot of not-for-profit work, I've often said it's far harder to spend money than it is to raise the money. So I wonder if you could reflect a little bit about where the county's thought process is in thinking about this additional opportunity in front of them.
Well, thank you very much, Linda, for agreeing to do this, and my thanks to the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this event and sponsoring other forums throughout the year that, again, bring people closer to their government. And it's an honor to be sitting here next to my predecessor and a mentor and a friend. So I know what you mean when you say it's a lot harder to spend the money than to raise it, but I think we have to recognize that the people of Linn County have been through the ringer in this past year. As I noted, the coronavirus has forever changed our way of life. It slowed down our economy dramatically. And on top of that, we were hit by essentially a Category 4 hurricane over the summer, which destroyed homes and businesses and put a lot of people out of work because of that too. So I believe there will be ample opportunity to use the funds we receive from the ARA
to help people. Now, how we do that is the challenge, to make sure we're doing it in a way that is equitable. We are still awaiting the rules and parameters to come from the Department of Treasury, which will inform how we can, in fact, spend those dollars. However, recently I've directed our Director of Policy and Administration, Darren Gage, to lead a small working group that will help us think through what kind of process we can develop at Linn County. And in part of that thinking, it will require the Board of Supervisors to try to identify areas of need, and we'll have to determine after that, according to the rules, how we can disperse those dollars, given the framework we develop. With all of that said, again, I am acutely aware of the pain in the community, and I am looking forward, as I am sure many in the community are looking forward, to being able to meet that need through the American Rescue Act.
Excellent. Next, I want to talk a little bit about an issue that you know is near and dear to my heart and you've participated in, and that is the concept of resilience. So the derecho this year, and certainly the flood before it, and certainly what I think of as the almost floods that we've experienced, we know that we can be a resilient community. We also know that people are tired, and that this year the combination of COVID with the derecho made response a challenge. But there are plans afoot in this community to address resilience in kind of a new way, a way that encompasses more people and gets us working as a team. And I wonder if you might reflect on that for a little bit.
I'd be happy to. And again, I appreciate you acknowledging that Linn County has been through the ringer. And our residents are used to responding, and in a way that is historically and traditionally Iowan. Neighbors are always ready to help neighbors. However, the people need to rely on their government to be able to respond. And a big part of resilience is taking the time to learn about your community, to learn about past failures, and to search for opportunities for stronger collaboration and communication. I am proud to be able to work in concert with several different community stakeholders in an exercise being led by Leslie Wright, who is the deepest of thinkers and is a leading expert on resilience, as you and I and Leslie and others have participated in resilience roundtables over the past few years. And I think that that will serve as an opportunity, a starting point, if you will, for us to really reevaluate how we can improve our response capabilities. And as I noted in my address, response capabilities that include ample resources for the most vulnerable in our community. And on top of that, I think people in the community are going to realize that sustainability means more than just encouraging people to recycle. Sustainability is an entire sort of thought framework. It's how can we make our communities more resilient, and how can we make our communities sustainable into the future? And part of that work requires us to think about what is ailing our communities and our environment, to anticipate future threats and challenges, and to help design our communities and government processes to meet those challenges. I am thrilled to have the soon-to-be Dr. Tamara Marcus leading our sustainability department at Linn County. And Linn County as an enterprise is thrilled to be a part of these conversations on resilience.
Excellent. I know that Dawn is working on questions, but and hopefully this one won't get you too started, but the legislature is hopefully about to wrap up. It's been an interesting legislative session, and I'm wondering if you could maybe speak about one or two things that give you some hope and one or two things that you found most concerning, particularly for local government, because I know there's always an edge between the federal government and the state government, and the state never wants the feds to do too much and make them do too many things. And the state and local governments have that same sort of edge. And I always thought of counties as being the place where all things flow downhill. Right. So with that in mind, maybe you could reflect from this session, like I said, a couple of the things that might give you hope and a couple of the things that you found really challenging.
So I'll reverse the answer because I want to end on a good note.
Yes, that's good.
I will say this, with all of the challenges we faced throughout the state of Iowa, there was a lot of noise coming out of the legislature that really, in my estimation, missed the mark. I mean, you had bills being drawn up that was trying to dictate what kind of things could be taught in our schools, and folks totally misunderstanding the 1619 project. You
founded, I might, or put out by an Iowan.
An Iowan.
An Iowan.
Yes, a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist out of Waterloo. You had a full-on assault on voting rights across this state, which is not only an affront to Iowans who I think many across the country recognize are incredibly politically astute and tuned in and civic-minded, but it's quite honestly an affront to democracy. Our fundamental right as Americans, literally the basis, the foundation of this country, is the right for us to choose our own destiny and choose our own leaders. And it is hard to do that when seemingly every year there are new rules and regulations placed on Iowans that govern their ability to vote. And along with that, I have to make the point, and I think many people expect me to do this, I think there was a ridiculous response to the Black liberation movement that happened all across the country. And we see this in what I will call, as a broad sort of scope of legislation, as Back the Blue initiatives, which had very little to do with supporting law enforcement and more to do with sending a message, I think, to people invested in this liberation struggle that they were to have none of it. And part of these initiatives, couched under these initiatives, were initiatives that would make it easier, and it's already pretty easy here in this state, for people to own and access firearms and to conceal them, to take them into more places. By the way, this legislation was not supported by any law enforcement agency in the state, as most of these law enforcement agencies spoke out and said, these actions will make our communities less safe. And you talked about this early on. There were parts of legislation, and I believe these are trying to be amended, that would penalize local governments, county governments, for having to reprioritize funding for their law enforcement agencies. And that, I think our friends in the state legislature learned that sometimes you have to readjust your budgets because you have to readjust your budgets. And not everybody is out to punish our law enforcement agencies. So hopefully that's being worked on. Now, with all of that said, what I am encouraged by is that our members in the General Assembly, our representatives in the General Assembly, have honored their commitments to the backfill, which, had that blown up, would have had a catastrophic impact on our budgets here at the county. And there was some measure of pandemic relief that the state recognized. And the state also recognized the need for relief in terms of our derecho recovery. So there are some things that were encouraging. And I think many Iowans are recognizing the importance of making sure you know who you're sending to Des Moines to represent your interest.
Absolutely. So I'm hopeful that Dawn Jones is out there somewhere that might be able to toss you some questions. So we'll see how well technology works.
All right. I can read a question from
You
a
can go
panelist.
for it. I think you should go for it, Stacey.
So, Don, I will just read the question I see on the screen, and that is, what is the county doing to address water quality issues? This is a fantastic question. As many people in Linn County know, that a few years ago, the Water and Land Legacy Bond was passed by the people of Linn County to supplement the work that is already being done by our Conservation Department. And so our Conservation Department, led by Dennis Goumet, has identified a number of water projects across the county to work on and to enhance. And I would encourage folks to check out their website and access that information, as there will be more details there. In addition, I would also say that water quality projects has always been a focus historically of not only our Conservation Department, but on members of the board, particularly our outgoing Supervisor Brent Olson, who made this a priority. So we work with our partners in the community. We work certainly with our partners in conservation because we recognize the importance of this endeavor. But we are encouraged by what we see from the projects that are lined up with the Water and Land Legacy Bond.
Excellent. So could we get another question put up? There we go.
I still see the same question.
Okay.
I think they're out of questions.
They're out of questions. Well, the good news is I always have more questions. So I think I would like to switch over a little more to something that you brought up that Supervisor Ben Rogers has been working on. And those are mental health issues. So we know that COVID has had a huge impact all over the nation, and certainly here in the U.S. and in Linn County. But I think it's also important to recognize that research tells us that in any disaster, whether it's a derecho or COVID, that vulnerable populations always pay the highest price. That being said, I think that there are probably a number of unmet mental health issues ahead for us. So can you talk a little bit about that landscape? I know the Access Center is there, but I know there are several partners in Linn County that you'll be working with. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So first, I want to recognize Supervisor Ben Rogers for his tireless efforts on raising awareness about issues around mental health and working with the community partners that I will acknowledge here in a bit to get to the Mental Health Access Center. It was no easy feat, and I had the benefit of spending several years watching Ben Rogers in action. So the Mental Health Access Center was a massive community project. And some of the community partners include the Penn Center, Foundation 2, and the Abbey Center. And these individual organizations have come together to open, I believe, what is the second Mental Health Access Center in the state of Iowa recently here in Linn County. What I will also acknowledge is that it's not only vulnerable communities that experience mental health issues, as I'm sure you know. I'm saying this for the edification of our viewers, but we have to recognize that people of all different social stations in life experience mental health issues. And we also have to recognize that there is a stigma out there that we're working to resolve. People believe that accessing mental health services somehow makes you weak or means you're not a good leader. And I try to tell people often that I see a therapist, and most of my friends in professional life see therapists as well, and that I encourage folks to access these services. So, part of what I think is going to be a really good result of opening these mental health access centers is breaking down the stigma that exists around that, and government has a role to play in doing that.
Excellent. We have another question on screen, and
I will try to read it here.
And actually, I'm going to give you a little help.
Okay.
How do you envision derecho recovery timeline to be inclusive of homelessness, and how can we engage the community to help?
The derecho recovery timeline to be inclusive of the homeless. So I appreciate the question because in my mind, the question acknowledges the fact that the derecho has exacerbated our unhoused population and at the very least made a lot of folks housing insecure in this community. And in the early days of the derecho, I vividly remember, because I wasn't getting a lot of sleep, driving around a large county vehicle at 4 in the morning, picking up people who were either going to work or getting off work who had nowhere to stay, and making sure I got them to a hotel room. And we had incredible assistance from the City of Cedar Rapids and from our partners in the state government. I do want to acknowledge that. I again have to reference my good friend Supervisor Ben Rogers, who has been a champion for raising awareness around homelessness in this community. And we are in talks right now with the City of Cedar Rapids about expanding our services to the homeless. We do have temporary shelters operating right now, and we still are housing individuals in hotels because we are at overflow capacity right now. But what I often say to people is, yes, we have to meet that immediate need. Yes, we have to get people housed, right? But the bigger question is why are so many people in our state, in our community, experiencing housing? How do we get underneath the problem? And getting underneath the problem is just a colloquial way of saying we have to address these systemic issues, the things that cause people to be in this position in the first place. And that takes us back to something else I talked about, safe, equitable, and thriving communities, which you helped work on in the infancy of that project, which looks at the underpinnings of poverty, which can lead to all of these things that we're trying to solve for. Poverty can lead to people getting in trouble with the law and gun violence, and it certainly can lead to homelessness as well. So in addition to being sensitive to addressing the urgent needs of the homeless, we have to make sizable investments in the systemic causes of these issues as well.
And so as a bit of a follow-on from that, I want to note that it's been, 8 or so years ago that Four Oaks did quite a bit of work related to housing. And one of the things that their research showed, and this was research done right here in Cedar Rapids and Linn County, and that was that for children to succeed in school and in life, they had to have secure housing. And without secure housing that made kids feel safe, they were less likely to be successful. So they embarked on what we now know as the ANI program, and there's an enormous amount more of owner-occupied housing. But one of the things the derecho did, like we already had a problem with affordable housing, and the derecho really impacted some of the affordable housing. that we have. And I wish that we could find a better, a better term than affordable housing, because I think it sets people off on the wrong path. But it's really safe and secure housing at the most manageable cost is kind of the way I look at it. Mm-hmm. So even moving beyond homelessness, taking it a step further, what possibilities do you see going forward in the community for addressing this issue, which I also might add is an issue all across this country.
Right.
So we are not unique. We just happen to have been hit a little harder this year because of the derecho.
Right. Well, first I want to recognize the work that Four Oaks did and continues to do, and the Affordable Housing Network is doing incredible work in this community as well, along with other partners in the affordable housing space. I do believe that everyone is entitled to safe housing. I think that should be a priority for government, and this is a philosophical struggle that I think happens in government, and I am ready to continue to be on the side arguing for more resources dedicated to affordable housing. But here again is another one of these issues where we have to ask ourselves, why are there so many individuals in our community who are struggling with finding housing, who are struggling with staying in housing once they find it? And what is driving the shortage of affordable housing? These are the questions we have to ask ourselves while addressing the acute needs of getting people into homes. And there are a number of different issues, and I can literally start ticking off a number of them, right? I mean,
Yep.
There are barriers right now to affordable housing. Some of those barriers include an issue that I've worked on in the past, and it's the Ban the Box initiative, where there are some individuals who are discriminated against because they have a criminal record, right? There are some individuals who are discriminated against now, and I'm not sure if this bill was passed, but it was a bill that caught our eye, where landlords would be able to turn people away who were essentially using government funds and subsidies.
Commonly known as Section 8 housing.
Commonly known
Yes.
as Section 8, which is a horrible thing to do, particularly in this time where we are experiencing an increased number of unhoused individuals. Homelessness in this state increased dramatically from last year, and of course we're seeing a lot of that reflected here in Linn County. And on top of that, we have to do more work with incentivizing developers to build housing that will even allow for low-income individuals to live there. And building housing that is resilient. And the City of Cedar Rapids has done some good work in that space, working with responsible developers to get some of these projects in our community, but we have to do more.
So we have another question here, as from a person who notes that they're a business owner of a consulting firm who tries to bring and keep ethnically diverse talent in our area. We depend on the vibrancy and welcoming feeling of our communities. What role is the county planning, or should they plan, in driving the mission of equity and inclusion into the fabric of the county?
That is an excellent question, and a question that I think should be posed to every government in the state. The issue of retaining diverse populations, recruiting and then retaining diverse populations is one I think that should also be on the minds of every business owner in this community. Linn County is taking some proactive measures in trying to figure out how we can attract and retain a more diverse workforce. Right now, our workforce isn't very diverse. We will be working with top rank services a local company based in our community, minority-owned company based in our community, to help us think through some strategies as to how we can do that. And not only that, to help our managers learn some leadership skills to help navigate what we hope to be a growing, more diverse workforce at Linn County. Some of the things our community can do, because this is an all hands on deck effort, we have to first understand the benefits of a diverse population, because I think a lot of people hear this and they just say, oh, you know, that's Stacey Walker again talking about diversity. But our diversity is what makes us strong. Our diversity in thought, in race, and religion, and all of the other identities is what makes us strong. And we have to pay special attention to historically underrepresented groups in our workforce, historically underrepresented groups in business, and I'm talking specifically about women and minorities, because that is the future. And I also say this, we either invest now in these efforts or we're going to pay the price later. These upcoming generations don't want to live in a place where people are all the same, and they don't want to live in a place where they go into their workforce and the workplace is all the same. So we either do the hard work now and work with these companies that are trying to help us think through these issues, or the community as a whole is going to pay the price in the future.
And I would sort of add as a follow-on, because I know this is true in a lot of the schools, whether you think about University of Iowa or Iowa State, that particularly in the area of public administration, so cities and counties have jobs, and people can aspire to learn that practice of doing public administration work. But I know a few years ago, the county went down to the University of Iowa to talk to public administration, people getting their masters in public administration, and ask how many in the class thought that they would go into local government. And not one soul in the entire class had thought about the potential. It's like it hadn't even occurred to them.
Right.
So the good news is I know the county developed a relationship to help with that.
Absolutely.
But I think this is a great opportunity to say to the audience that encouraging people to make the choice to serve in local government, to make a difference, whatever you do, I mean, there are always jobs open at the county. And so it's sort of a follow-on.
Absolutely.
People in the community need to believe that they can play a part in their government. And the businesses need to be welcoming as well. And
Absolutely.
I think we're on our way, but we've got more work to do.
We do, and I'll just quickly note this. Shortly after I started at the county, I was able to develop a program called Future Leaders of Linn County, where we would invite some of the best and brightest students from around the county. I think at our peak we had over 100 high school students participating, where we brought them in to the county for a full day, fed them breakfast and lunch, and they got to shadow different county officials, go to meetings with them, and we also put them through a simulator of sorts where we presented them with 3 or 4 problems, real problems that we face as a county government. We had the sheriff's office presented a problem one year, and Les Beck, Planning and Development, presented an issue. And these students were given a budget, and they were presented with the pros and cons, and they elected their peers to the Linn County Board of Supervisors, and they really had to work through those issues. And the point of all of that was to get young people interested in local government, get them to understand what local government does. And like you told me right before I ran for office, understanding that the job in local government will be as hard and as serious as you make it. It will be as hard and as serious as the problems you endeavor to solve. And I think we were able to communicate that to our students. Now with the pandemic, we have been unable to bring that program back. But I am once everybody gets vaccinated and we reach herd immunity, I am looking forward to bringing that program back. And I got to make one more shameless plug for the Surik Burhan Fellowship that we now offer as well, which is a fellowship for just a few students, college-age students, some of the best and the brightest that will do intensive study on certain policy issues with the Linn County Board of Supervisors. And we have had some brilliant individuals come through Linn County on that program, and I'm looking forward to restarting that program once this pandemic comes to an end.
Excellent. We only have a few minutes, but we have another question. This is a big one because it's like, how are we going to address climate change? Oh. But this is with a particular focus to encouraging installations of solar panels or roofs for residents and businesses.
Wow, this is a great question. I would encourage folks to check out the work being done in partnership with Linn County, the City of Cedar Rapids, our Public Health Department on incentives for solar buys. You can find information on any one of those websites about that program. But I want to kind of zoom out from that and get back to this conversation about sustainability. So a lot of people, a lot of criticism I often hear is either this: the problem of climate change is so big that what is one itty-bitty government going to do about it? I hear criticism that addressing the climate chaos that is approaching us is not the business of county government. And I just want to say this, quite simply. You think about all of these issues we have to address, all of them. Racial justice, resilience, in terms of our flooding, tornadoes, natural disasters. None of that stuff will matter. None of it matters at all if 40, 50 years down the road we don't have a habitable planet to live on. It is the job of government to focus on the problems in the here and now, but to also focus on what challenges we may face 40, 50 years down the road. That is why it is the work of government to think about sustainability in the here and now. That is why it qualifies as an emergency now, because our grandchildren, great-grandchildren, need to be able to enjoy this wonderful place that we are able to enjoy. I cannot stress enough that I believe that the individual acts of these governments, the City of Cedar Rapids, Linn County, Marion, Iowa City, when taken together, will have an impact on our ecosystem here. And I think it will be a model for the country. And that's something we need to lean into because we owe it to future generations to get that right.
Excellent. Doing a quick check to see if there are any more questions lurking out there. So I want to take another moment to share with you the opportunity of recognizing the people who serve in local government, because we really have long had a great standout of people and departments, but I think you and I have talked before about the challenge of how little people understand county government unless there's some huge thing that goes on and people don't see anything. So I wonder if you and I could talk for just a little bit about what it is that county government does.
Oh, great.
And maybe we could just make this a back and forth. So, you're on the Board of Supervisors, so that means you get to set the budget, which is a big deal, right?
It is a big deal, yeah.
So talk to people a little bit about the process of how that budgeting works. I mean, this doesn't just magically come into being.
No, it does not. I need to start by acknowledging our finance director, Don Gindrich, and our budget director, Sarah Barros, who are the best in the field. They are best in class, and they organize a process that takes several months that begins with assessing sort of our status quo, where we are, assessing the needs of the county, and inviting all of our county department heads and elected officials to present their case, if you will, about what those departments need in order to be successful in the upcoming fiscal years. And we have a budgeting for outcomes process. So anytime a county department is asking for an increase in funds, they have to defend it. They have to make their case. And we as policymakers on the Board of Supervisors sit in a number of meetings, public meetings, by the way, where we are getting this information, at the end of which we take a look at our revenues, what we have taken in from the levy, and we look at our other debt obligations, and we try to reconcile all of that, understanding that we will always get more requests than we could possibly fund, and that the need is greater than we could possibly meet with any one budget, which means we often have to look at projects, kind of like our capital improvement plan. We have to look at projects. We can do a little bit of this in this budget year, fiscal year, and we can do a little bit of it more in ensuing fiscal years. So it is a complex process. Of course, you know all of this. I'm just restating it for our viewers here. But we've got a $130 million budget, and that was a decrease from last year. Obviously, this was a tough budgeting year for us. But again, through the leadership of Don Gendrich, Sarah Barrows, and through some enterprising minds on the Linn County Board of Supervisors and with our department heads and other elected officials, we were able to provide the necessary critical resources and even enhance our services without raising the county levy rate. I am incredibly proud of that work, and I cannot say enough about our budget and finance team that finds a way to make it work every single year.
Yes, they do, and they win awards for their work too, I might add.
Yes, they do.
So we have another question that is really looking at the number of large empty buildings that are around all the places in the county. And so do we have any sense yet of where we expect people might find employment, and what's going on in terms of encouraging companies to come here? I know that a lot of that sits within the Economic Alliance, but I also know that the county has been a supporter of the Economic Alliance.
Yeah.
So,
yep, the county is a member of the Cedar Rapids Metro Economic Alliance, and I believe we are a member of the equivalent organization for Marion. We obviously interface with municipal governments that are interested in economic development as well. On top of that, the county does appropriate a small amount of funds every year through our Economic and Community Development Fund, where we look for opportunities in the community to spur economic development, quite simply put. It is my personal belief that cities are engineered to do economic development a little better than counties, but we still have a role to play as well. And I think one of the big ways counties can meaningfully participate in economic development is actually through the community services that we offer. When you have a healthy society, when you have citizens whose basic needs are being met, those folks are then able to go out and become the workers of today and the workers of tomorrow. So part of economic development is taking care of the basic human needs of our citizenry. And Linn County does that very, very well, and we will continue to do that because it is critical.
excellent. So a questioner notes that flooding is a large issue in our county, and it has been for a long time. So curious about how solar panels as a sustainable practice would improve that issue, as they would decrease the water holding capacity on that amount of land that they consume, which would be an increase of water flowing through Cedar Rapids. So this is really more about how do you manage the absorption rate and capacity in a community. So solar's great,
Right.
but you don't want to impact the water holding capacity
Right.
as well.
This is a beautifully intricate and rather specific question.
Yes.
Let me just say this. The beauty of having a sustainability department, the beauty of having a soil and water expert, the beauty of having a conservation department, and having strong ties to our municipal governments, i.e. Cedar Rapids, that is literally building a multi-million-dollar flood wall in this community, is that those experts can come together to think about those things. I will be honest, I don't have intimate knowledge about that particular question, but I can guarantee the questioner that the work that conservation is doing by putting up wetlands that can absorb a certain amount of water coming from upstream, the work that our sustainability department is doing to ensure that we are building in a way that is environmentally friendly, the work that our facilities department is doing to ensure that our existing structures are as environmentally friendly as possible. All of that together is, and more, is what we need to ensure a sustainable community. All of that and more, I believe, is the job of government. We not only need to do these things because it's the right thing to do, but we need to do these things so that we can be an example to people and we can show folks why this is important, and we could be an example to other governments, quite frankly, as well.
Indeed. And I think that to the questioner, it is possible sometimes to have two things at the same time. So I think you can expand solar capacity, and I think there are ways you can get that solar capacity onto roofs and in different places where you're also managing the water runoff.
Absolutely.
And that, I think, leads us to this sort of interesting perspective, again, that people may not know about the county, and both in their land use plan and when people think about development, Linn County, if I'm not mistaken, has long used an agricultural rating so that people cannot develop on good land. Like, it's not okay to go out and just say, I'm going to do
Right.
a 40-acre development out in the middle of nowhere, if I'm not mistaken. So you might...
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I mean, our planning and development department has a legacy. I mean, it was amplified under the direction of Les Beck, and it is certainly being continued under the direction of Charlie Nichols, that takes these practices into consideration when we are zoning, when we are offering build permits, when we are evaluating land. And I can tell you now, quite honestly, one of the priorities of one of my colleagues on the board, Supervisor Louis Zembaugh, is to protect our agricultural lands. Supervisor Zembaugh is a farmer and brings a lot of that knowledge and expertise with him to the board. So there is an interest not only on the board, but sort of enterprise-wide, the entire county, in making sure we're good stewards of the land and that we are using the land in the best way so that it is fruitful and that it protects the residents of Linn County, and that it sticks around for a long time to come, that it's sustainable.
Excellent. And I think that, if I'm not mistaken, the county has long been involved with the East Central Council of Governments, East Central Iowa Council of Governments, and to note the farmers is particularly some of the work on the Indian Creek watershed. And that was such a collaborative effort between people who were in conservation as well as the farming community. And so sometimes we talk a lot about all the ways we struggle in government because people are going head to head. But that's a really good example how, with time and patience, everybody understood they had the common goal of sustainability.
Right. Right. That's a really good point. And just on that note, governments do have competing interests, and it's okay to come into conflict every now and again because you're fighting for what you think is going to be best for your constituents. But what you mentioned is a great example of government collaboration. I mean, that's essentially why ECCOG exists. But further to your point, Linn County is a part of several water management associations, WMAs, where we are taking a macro approach to planning and development based off of our watersheds and how we manage those, what they're doing, and how we can fold those into a larger sustainability planning process.
So I hope that one of the takeaways that the audience has had today is that the breadth and depth of your local government, of your county, is pretty diverse. Mm-hmm. And I know one thing that I've talked nationally about is that no one in their right mind would put all the things that county government does together. So when people say you should operate more like a business, could you talk a little bit about the diversity of what the county does?
Yeah.
You know, from elections to land use planning to veteran services to...
Oh my goodness, yeah. Government should not operate as a business. I think what people get at is that government should be efficient, and government certainly should be efficient, but the reason why government should never try to operate as a business is because businesses have profit motives. Your government should not have a profit motive. Your government should exist to solve problems, to help as many people as it can help, and then to get out of the way. The government should not be a competitive market force for its citizens. And there are just some services that I think citizens are entitled to without having to pay for them. And that is my philosophical belief. What your local government does is quite diverse. I mean, it's incredibly diverse. And what we need to be doing, in my opinion, is looking for ways in which we can enhance our services to the people, ways in which we can solve the problems that they encounter on a day-to-day basis that businesses can't solve for them, right? Ways in which we can do that for them. And we need to be looking at ways in which we can do both of those things, making good use of the taxpayer dollars that allow us to do these things. And this last fiscal year, or this current fiscal year, this current budget that we are in, is a good example of us doing that. With a pandemic, with a derecho, with a sluggish economy, Linn County, with a decreased budget, I think our budget was about 1% less this time around than it was last year, was still able to provide all of these services, was still able to manage an enterprise as diverse as county government, as you mentioned, from Veterans Affairs to water and soil to conservation, all of these things, law enforcement apparatus, public health, my goodness. All of these things, we were able to do that, increase and enhance these services without the levy rate increasing. That's good government. It's not about how big or how small, it's how effective government can be.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to recognize that sometimes people need the gift of time. And so I want to thank you, Stacey, for being here today, for also taking the time to do the pre-recording of the video address. I am always grateful, both as a League member and as a former member of the board, to the League of Women Voters for the work they do in helping to educate the community about government, whether it's through forums or programs or these kinds of activities. I'm grateful that they now include the county as well as Marion and Cedar Rapids in their state of addresses. So thank you so very much. I do want to do a quick shout out to our sponsors that, again, are Shuttleworth and Ingersoll, Mid-America Energy, Alliant Energy, the Greater Cedar Rapids Community Foundation, ITC, as well as Lynch Dallas, the City of Cedar Rapids Utility Managers, the Cedar Rapids and Iowa City Building Trades and Hawkeye Area Labor Council, HR Green, Collins Aerospace, and Simmons Perrine. Also, if you are not a league member, we encourage you to consider becoming a member soon, which you can do by checking out our website. And I want to thank everyone who took time out of their day today to join us. I want to thank all of the elected officials who make Linn County the great government that it is, particularly today noting on Chairman Stacey Walker, as well as Ben Rogers and Louis Zumbaugh. You gentlemen do a great job. You make us proud. We saw a lot of thank yous along with the questions. So thank you, everyone, and have a great afternoon.